guest and our first presenter today. Gustav Toppenberg is a digital transformation executive and principal consultant with BTOES Insights. He's an enterprise transformation executive with over 20 years of experience. His background includes building and leading transformational efforts for both small and large global companies. He is also a co-author of the recently released book, Architecting Growth in the Digital Era: How to Exploit Enterprise Architecture to Enable Corporate Acquisitions. Gustav, it's a real pleasure and privilege to have you join us today and share your expertise with us. I am going to make you our official presenter here. So you see a pop-up screen come up on your end. And when you accept that, Gustav, you'll be able to share your presentation for our audience.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's a real honor and privilege. Just a quick audio check and make sure that you can see.
It looks good, and your audio is coming in well as well.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be speaking to all of the live attendees at today's presentation, as well as all of those who will be watching this in the future. We are at a unique point in time in the history of our planet, and I'm sure many other presenters have referred to it as well. And to me, it is a cautious time, but also a very optimistic time at the same time. I've been doing a lot of research and practical work in digital transformation over the last 20 years. And one of the threads of importance in the enterprise architecture space is what I'm referring to as the digital backbone. And so when Jose and the team reached out and asked, could I present something, this was the first thing that came to mind, because I think it's so topical at this point in time that we think about how to make our transformational efforts, in particular those that are digital in nature, more predictable, lower cost, and have faster time to value as well. So that's what I plan to share with you today. Not everybody is familiar with the concept of a digital backbone, and I'm certainly not the first one to have coined that idea, but I'm going to share with you, first of all, what the digital backbone is all about, how it fits into digital transformations, and what you as enterprise architecture leaders can use it for in helping to build a foundation while all these digital transformation efforts are taking place. I'm going to advance the slide here. So here are some things I thought we could talk about today. And of course, when I mean talk, it's a little bit more difficult in a virtual conference, but the team here who put this event together today have made that a lot easier. Two things we're going to do. One is we're going to do some poll questions along the way for a little bit of interaction, as well as my encouragement for you to share any and all slides at the same, or any and all questions on the slides as we go through. So as I mentioned, I'll share a little bit about what I mean by digital backbone and how it supports digital transformations that we're all engaged in. We'll talk a little bit about designing and building that digital backbone and connecting it to business goals, identifying potentially some ways of connecting the platform, the data and digital platform that we're building, which is essentially the digital backbone, back into value streams, back into customer journeys, because of course that is what everybody wants to talk about today. I haven't met a business executive who doesn't want to talk about a value stream or customer journey or designing a better experience for clients, customers, employees. So I want to leave you with some ideas on how you can connect this idea back into that business conversation, because after all, that is what real enterprise architecture is all about. It's not just being in the machine room of the technology side. And then the last one is, how do you then engage executive stakeholders and create that momentum to invest in and improve the digital backbone? And then I'll share with you some lessons learned. All right. First of all, the reality and the recognition is that the pressures of digital transformations are constant. And so what I want you to keep in the back of your mind as we go through today's presentation and discussion around around questions is, does your company need a digital backbone? And I would love to hear from you as you go through the next little bit, your thoughts on this. The idea is that this digital backbone is a way, as I said before, is making your digital transformations more predictable, lower cost, and faster to market. And we'll get into exactly what that means as well. All right, first of all, whenever you present something new, you always, in my mind, you always have to define it. And English is not my first language, as it sounds like it. We have a very global audience. So I like to define terms as we go. So here, I'll give you my working definition, and this has been about 4 or 5 years now in the making. First, I started looking at digital, relating to binary and digits and digital images and so forth, employing digital communications through broadcasting, for instance. The backbone is this foundation or substantial or sturdy part of something. We know it best as the backbone in our bodies, but it could be a firm or resolute character, or in this particular case, technologies that support how a company architects itself by design as opposed to by happenstance. So my working definition of a digital backbone is an assemblage of enterprise-grade technology and infrastructure, methodologies, skills, and talents. And again, my guess is, as you go through this, you may have things to add as well. So I'd love to hear what you have to add to it. The idea is that all of those technologies, infrastructure, methodologies, skills, and talent, and data as well, are organized in a way that allows anyone engaged in digital transformations the ability to easily employ that digital backbone. The idea is almost like someone told me once, it's sort of like an enterprise service bus, but for digital transformation. It's the idea that every single executive or function, planning to or aspiring to transform a different part of the enterprise are going to be able to leverage those digital components, those digital backbone components. And as they do so, they're employing them, they're enriching them, and then they're also lending them back to other transformation efforts as well. You can think of that in terms of skills and talents. If every single executive in every single function of your company are undertaking a digital transformation, they're likely employing people like Scrum Masters and product owners and UX designers and data and analytics people, and I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Wouldn't it be great if at the end of that digital transformation, rather than them maybe perhaps no longer having something to do, that they came from a place in the organization that they can then be sent back to and then get redeployed somewhere else? Same thing is true with methodologies, technology, infrastructure, and data. The more we use it and the more we connect it together, the richer it becomes for the organization. And if we as enterprise architects take our job serious, I think that's a big part of the value that we can provide. So that's the digital backbone. As I mentioned, I've been researching and working on this topic for a long time. Any of you interested in digging into some of the more specifics of it, I have some articles posted on Cutter Consortium. The link is right there. You can look up my name, and feel free to reach out to me as well if you're unable to get access to a particular article you're interested in. But it's been an enriching journey to look at for sure. So I wanted to, before we go any further, I wanted to share with you a depiction of from an architectural standpoint, given that this is an enterprise architecture audience, wanted to give you just an idea of, if you put it on a page, this is what the technology, infrastructure, data piece of the digital backbone looks like. And you think, oh, that doesn't look that, and it doesn't look that different. It doesn't look that impressive. And I will tell you, at different times, I've come back to this picture and I've looked at it and I go, it all makes sense, from an architectural standpoint, that these are all the different components of a really good digital backbone. And so I thought I would share that with you. Being vulnerable is an important thing as an executive and as a digital transformation leader. And I'll tell you that Absolutely. If you look at this and you go, yeah, that actually, that makes sense. You should have all of these different components. That's the first step. This is not a difficult to adopt approach. It's what you do with this that's really, really critical. What you do with it is what comes next, and that is starting to recognize that in order for you to make digital transformation efforts lower cost, faster to market, and more predictable in terms of the outcome is, you have to start focusing on enterprise-grade capabilities that you as the enterprise architect, as the chief architect, as the CTO, as the CIO potentially, that you're going to invest in so that they can be leveraged over a multitude of different digital transformations. Because if you don't, and here's a scenario, a big global organization has, even given the difficult economic and socioeconomic circumstances currently in the pandemic, a large global organization may have big growth ambitions in the future, looking to take advantage of, in the most positive sense, what's going on currently and providing a better customer experience through digital channels, for instance, to their customers. But if that journey to do that is not built on enterprise-grade capabilities that are either presently there in the company or are being acquired so that they can scale to potentially other digital transformations, what you're creating are basically an additional set of silo towers per function, per business unit, per operating unit, whatever is relevant in your organization. And what you get is essentially a very siloed architecture and a very siloed rebuild of legacy, maybe in the cloud potentially, but it's going to inhibit your growth agenda. It is going to not bend the cost curve down for your technology investments, but instead it's actually going to inhibit your growth potential as a firm because it becomes so difficult and it starts to slow everything down. So that's the idea. Specific to business value streams and customer journeys, I think that's the tough conversation that a lot of us have had, is how do we connect a platform investment conversation to business value streams and customer journeys? I'll tell you more about that coming up here. But before we do that, let's do a quick poll question. And Jose, this is where I'll need your help. The first poll question should show up to the attendees, and it goes something like this. Does your company have a defined strategy for building out the digital backbone, or whatever you call it in your company, the digital platform capabilities to support digital transformation initiatives? Or is it just being sort of built per digital transformation? So it looks like the poll is open now, and we've made it very binary in terms of answers. So it's either a yes or it's a no.
So go ahead and cast your vote at the poll that's open right now. And I'll give you a few more seconds here so that you have an opportunity to say yes or no. Very good. 10 more seconds, yes or no to this question. All right, I'm closing the poll right now. And let's share the results. And Gustav, I'm not sure if you are able to see this. So what the results are is that 55% of the audience said yes, and 45% of the audience said no.
All right, sounds good. Well, that helps me tremendously. So thank you very much. I'm just going to reconfirm that you can still see my my slides after the poll has closed down. Is that correct?
Yes, you look good.
Excellent, perfect. Thank you very much. That really helps me a lot. I'll incorporate some of these poll answers back into the presentation as we go forward. Another thing that I thought I would share with you, now that you know a little bit more about what I mean by the digital backbone, the other part is the digital transformation. I can't tell you how many people, it's like enterprise architecture. For anybody you meet, there's a different definition of digital transformation. So I thought what I would do is I would share with you my mental model that I use for digital transformations to help you put in the context these two terms that you may or may not be familiar with. I'm sure digital transformation you're familiar with. So this comes out of CED, now Gartner. And it's a great way of depicting, I think, different kinds of focus areas for digital transformations. On the left-hand side, you have products, you have sales and marketing and customer service, and then you have functional and operations. When I think about the different executives that I work with, I try to figure out where are they at. Are they on the product side in terms of, directly touching the customer with a meaningful, either digital or tangible product? Are the executives in the sales, marketing, and customer service area? Are they trying to change a customer experience? Are they trying to reach a customer in a different direction or in a different way? Or are they working through channels potentially as well, and they're working one step removed from the customer? Or are they in functional areas? Are they trying to improve the employee experience? Are they trying to improve the supply chain through process automation? Are they trying to do analytics, for instance? And so on the left-hand side, you can see the enhancement side. So these are different things that are less transformational. They're more incremental in nature. They're still digital in nature, but they're more incremental. And then on the right-hand side, those are examples of what I think of as real digital transformation opportunities. So launching new products or services beyond the core business portfolios, transforming channels to match customer behaviors and preferences, and making broad investments in one or more corporate functions. So these are the ways where you're really digitizing to the core of a function. You're not just doing small incremental things like dynamic resource allocation, for instance. So hopefully that's useful as well. So again, when I think about digital transformation, this is the mental model that I use. All right, so the remainder of the time that we've got, I want to show you then, okay, so now that we have the digital backbone in place mentally, we have the digital transformation in place mentally as well. So what are some ways, and this is based on my experience, and based on conversations that I've had with executives like yourselves, enterprise architecture, CTO, CIO, colleagues and peers of mine. The idea is, so how do you go about building something like this for the, I think it was 45% plus, this is rote memory collection here, I believe it was 55 and 45. For the 45% of you who say that you don't have a strategy just yet, here's a method to begin to do this. And for the 55% of you who already have something, here's a way to use the strategy and potentially think of it rather than having the perfect architectural representation of the target state. How do you start with a back of the napkin representation? And then how do you get out there and test it, iterate on it, evolve the vision, and consult with the business stakeholders that you may have in different areas to get their sponsorship? So I'll tell you a little story about how that's worked for me. As I understand it, there's two different ways of building out your digital capabilities and your platform. The traditional way, number one, is business use cases. As an IT organization, you get a lot of requests for digitalization of something in one of those three areas from before. You are delivering digital enablers, enabling that particular use case. It's a lot of ad hoc, and the benefit is you get it directly tied to a specific business value, which is great. It shows that there's interest in there's interest in using digital technologies in order to overcome business problems or to accelerate business solutions and get more value out of them. It shows that you're responsive as an IT or technology organization, and if you're following an iterative Agile Scrum methodology, you're likely getting to a response to that particular use case faster. Lots of drawbacks, right? So risks in terms of integration, incompatibility with your enterprise systems, with data, et cetera. There may be limited reuse, and you may not be able to truly scale it. And as I mentioned before, what you get is sort of a spaghetti architecture. Not ideal, and depending on the size of your organization and how fast you move, you may or may not need reusability in technology capabilities. But if you are a reasonable size or large size, you're going to want to make sure that if you have these growth ambitions, that you make architectural decisions and investment decisions in capabilities digitally that you can really rely on for reuse and scale. The other traditional way is the technology foundation, right? It's what we're all very familiar with. We have an IT strategy and it's going to align to the business strategy, but there's the IT budget for IT, and we're going to decide on how to invest in that, which means that we're going to do some app migration and app rationalization. We're going to do some migration to the cloud. We're going to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the kinds of things that are good hygiene for an IT organization, but it doesn't necessarily excite the business stakeholders at the same time. It's a very, IT principles-based approach. And I'm sure there's lots of us out there. I will tell you, I've been in the seat as well. I think of it as, when you do IT strategy, you sort of spin your propeller hat and you come up with some really great technology decisions. But whether or not they actually fit with the business realities of your organization is a question. And then it's also limited by the IT budget that you may have. So my recommendation is, a new approach to building out your digital platform, your data and digital platform, is marry the two together. Focus on business use cases and focus on the technology foundation. One of the lessons that I've learned is that if you put them together and build them in parallel, they'll start to feed each other's prioritization. And through iteratively co-delivering them, it really provides a better combination of showing speed, value, and scale all at the same time. You might say, well, that's easy. That's easier said than done. Absolutely, no question about it. I'll give you some recommendations. If this is of interest to you, I'll give you some recommendations. So just depicting it together, you're basically implementing use cases, and then you're designing and building the supporting technology foundation and the blocks all together. And what you end up with is essentially a digital business strategy, or enabling that digital business strategy. And you're doing it iteratively, so you're focusing on the minimal viable products along the way. That's a whole separate conversation around how to do that iteratively, and I'm sure all of you have different methodologies to use for that. But that's where that methodology part and the skills and talent part of the digital backbone come back in together. All right, we're going to do a second poll question since the first one went so well. The second one is, does your company's digital investments focus more on the business use cases and the transformations, the digital backbone, or the core capabilities, or evenly between the two, or maybe neither?
So the poll is open. Please go ahead and cast your vote. Very well, I'll give you a few more seconds here to cast your vote. Excellent, I'm closing the poll now. Sharing the results. And what we have here, Gustav, is that 50% answer as more on business use cases transformations, 29% evenly, 13% neither, and 8% more on digital backbone.
All right. Excellent. I'll just reconfirm that you can now see the presentation again before I move forward. I will assume that's a yes.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. That is a little surprising to me. I like the 25% of evenly between the two. That shows that a lot of you are already in this space of investing in both. The 50% in the business use cases, which is great. That means you are likely having some robust and valuable conversations, but it could also be a potential lean towards more of an ad hoc intake mechanism as well. I'll assume that you guys are great, enterprise architecture executives, and you're having really robust and valuable conversations, and the use cases are treated in a way that you're handling them and hopefully deriving some leverage and reuse. and then only 8% on the digital backbone. That's a little surprising to me, but I can't wait to see some of the questions that maybe come through as well. Thank you for providing me that insight. All right. I wanted to show you, if you build out the digital backbone with all the different capabilities. Earlier, I showed you a different version of it, and it was a little easier on the eye. Given that this is an EA group, I figured you guys could handle the next level of detail as well. And so if you've been thinking about the different kinds of technologies and where would they fit in, this is a representation of them, of where you might put them. But I think a reasonable way of representing it as well. So if you laid out to your executives and you said, look, we are wanting to build the best data and digital platform, the best digital backbone that we possibly can for our product, or sales, our marketing, our service, our functional partners. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have the best enterprise grade capabilities, and then every time there's a new digital transformation, we can reuse those capabilities. Part of it is just visibility. So if you've been thinking about where would something go, here's a representation of it that I've used in a past role of my own. And you can see the business value streams there on the top. So two considerations. So a question you can ask in terms of making your digital backbone relevant to a business executive or someone who's in the business value stream area is, if our aim is to support the audacious digital goals for the business, our digital foundation set up to do that, right? So if someone comes to you and asks about engagement for a digital transformation initiative in one of your different business units, operating units, et cetera, then the question is, there's two things. One is the leverage and reuse opportunity of, hey, we already have a technology that we can leverage and reuse. You don't have to invest in it. In fact, you can just plug in here, and there's an investment needed to integrate with it, but we already have it. Or in other cases, as we'll see shortly, it may be an opportunity then to use that investment not only for that use case, but much more broader. And with a little bit of additional investment, you can actually invest in an enterprise-grade capability like search, for instance, or like your data and analytics area. It could be in your API management area. There's lots of different areas where you may have a gap. And we'll talk a little bit about how you identify those as well. Consideration number two is you probably want to use some way of business-led governance. This is a way for you to decide, not only in IT, but with the business stakeholders who are passionate about this idea of building out the digital backbone, enroll them in a business-led governance area. And I can tell you a big area of focus and excitement is around data. Data, advanced analytics, et cetera, is one that every business stakeholder wants to get engaged in. So you can create some momentum for your digital backbone in that area. Again, in my previous experience, in my most recent role, that was definitely the case. All right. So with the time that we have remaining, I want to give you some recommendations, different ways that you can now approach this. First one is, now that you have a back of the napkin version, or maybe you have a fully built out digital backbone, a representation visually of your enterprise grade capabilities, assess those current foundational technology capabilities and assess whether or not they effectively and directly support your key business goals. So here's a mechanism of scoring those different capabilities that you might have called out either by capability name or actually by technology name in the different areas. And again, this is something that I've done in my previous role. And what you can do is you can score them, and you can say, well, you've identified some capabilities that support at least one area of the business. You found one that spans several areas of business but falls short on the enterprise grade. So an example of that in my previous role was, we had a CRM solution, for instance, that was really good for one part of our business, but fell short of really being an enterprise-grade capability. So did we have to remove it and not reuse it? No, we permitted it as part of the enterprise architecture principles and standards. We permitted it, but the next time someone came and asked if we had a CRM solution, we made sure that that investment was in an enterprise grade. So we didn't have basically two non-standards. that we invested in the standard the second time around. And then there are going to be a lot of capabilities that support your business goals across the entire enterprise as well. So different ways of scoring them. The other recommendation is if you're familiar with and comfortable with value streams and customer journeys, start to identify as enterprise architecture leaders, start to use your knowledge of the value stream and start to collect information about where are there friction points in that value stream. Here's a representative value stream that many of you probably are familiar with, either a lead to cash or a cash to collect, something like that as well. And so here are different ways that you as the enterprise architect can go in, identify the friction points, talk about how the digital backbone touch points that you have as enterprise grade capabilities can solve for that as well, and help them prioritize what investments are needed in order for this value stream to work more smoothly. My experience has been that you may have executives in different parts of the organizations, business units, et cetera, who would say, well, you know, we can work through a value stream pretty easily, and we can all agree that it's going to work more easily. But in the white space between legal, marketing, sales, you know, other functions like that, all of a sudden the exchange between systems or the inner link between processes aren't that easy to see. And I think that's where you as the enterprise architect or you as the CIO or CTO can help them with that white space and say, okay, there's some friction points we can remove here because we already have the technologies, or we're looking for someone to partner with to invest in a new one. And what that gives you then is the third recommendation is you can map business value streams and identify who to engage with and how to connect their pain points to specific initiatives and capabilities. So this gives you an opportunity to generate not only sponsorship for a particular investment in the digital backbone, but to potentially people who would be really good stewards of the digital backbone in general as well. You can see I'm a big Singing in the Rain fan. So my stakeholders here are connected to that, just in case anybody caught that. There you go. All right, third poll question, and then we'll wrap up, and we're just about out of time. So third poll question here. So what is your role in building the digital backbone or digital platform capabilities in your organization? Just love to understand a little bit about the audience as well. Hopefully you should see the poll.
Please go ahead and cast your votes. We have a few of you already voting. Option 1 is ITCXO, Chief Architect Enterprise, Business Sponsor, or Other. Give you a few more seconds to cast your vote. What is your role in building the digital backbone?
And that should have been Enterprise Architect, so my apologies. So if you're a Chief Architect or an Enterprise Architect, that's supposed to be that line.
You got it. Now we're closing the poll. Well done, everybody. And I'll share the results. And what we have, Gustav, is that 58% had other roles.
Okay.
And then we had 29% as Chief Architect and Enterprise.
Okay.
And 8% as ITCXO and 4% as a business sponsor.
All right. Well, we've got a little bit of representation from everybody. All right. Again, if I'd love to see the questions that come in after this as well, and hopefully that reflects the diversity of different roles as well. So thank you for that. All right. I'll wrap it up here with some lessons learned, just summary of what we've gone over so far, and then we'll go to questions. All right. So first one is, designing a business-aligned digital backbone. It's a way to hypothesize and define a beginning set of enterprise-grade capabilities. It's really and should really be all about enabling the enterprise's business goals and the growth agenda or the differentiation agenda of your organization. So I would start there by figuring out, if you don't already, what is that set of enterprise business goals. Then start to map your value streams and identify those critical stakeholders. We went over that just now because it helps you identify what are those priority areas. You use those maps and customer journeys to identify the white spaces, which essentially becomes your opportunities to find the sponsors for the digital backbone investments. And then you can create a real momentum around the collective digital transformation efforts. You're creating and enrolling a group of individuals who see that if they're connected and understanding the digital capabilities that you have, then any net new investment that comes through, maybe from a difficult stakeholder who wants to have their own sort of siloed architecture, you can use that group of other stakeholders that are good stewards of not only the digital backbone, but also good stewards of making the right decisions for the company. You can use them as partners in driving that business-led governance in the right direction. And what you'll end up with is, again, a digital backbone that, if created the right way, iteratively and over time, it'll continue to drive value consistently, from an evolving process. You're building this digital backbone over time, use case and digital foundation pairwise. And as you're doing that, you are making the organization more adaptive and flexible to changes, because all these different areas of the digital backbone are all going to change, and they are progressively changing very quickly. If you're already on a path and having good conversations with and partnership with your business stakeholders, and they're understanding how to leverage things like process automation, digital process automation, or cybersecurity, or data and analytics, you can be much more reactive or proactive potentially to technology changes, and you can exploit and leverage them to your advantage, as opposed to the other way around, where you always sort of feel on the back leg as an enterprise architect. So that's what I've got to share with you today. I hope you found that interesting. I'd love to see your questions, and please feel free to reach out after today and after the conference as well. Thank you for the opportunity.
Gustav, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I'm going to keep an eye on all questions coming in here, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share all of that with us. One of the first questions that came up while you're doing the presentation was related to what do you see in the landscape that may have shifted in the, of course, in the context of this global pandemic, and so many businesses are pivoting their strategies. What have you seen on the field with your clients and organizations you collaborate with as the major shifts when it comes to enterprise architecture?
Good question. I think the biggest shift that I've experienced lately has been in two. One is in innovation. Enterprise architects that I know in the past 6 months have been further engaged in innovation topics. Not necessarily big, like overly transformational topics, but how can we leverage and reuse the capabilities that we currently have, that we've invested in, but for novel and new things, such as if you've invested heavily in web conferencing technologies. How can we use those web conferencing technologies not only just to have meetings, for instance, but how can we leverage them to do other things that we're familiar with in a co-located environment? So I think that's one area where you're getting into more innovation topics. The enterprise architect tends to be the one that has a really good understanding of sort of where all the good, interesting capabilities are used and leveraged, and could potentially be reused and leveraged. And so we see CIOs, CTOs, business stakeholders as well, who want to figure out, rather than going through the whole investment process and getting a new capability, is there stuff that we can already use? And then I would say the other area is in the advanced analytics space, AI, ML, DL, et cetera. I know myself personally, the projects that I'm working on has me pulled into progressively more and more an area of advanced analytics, getting an opportunity to really define the front end part of the advanced analytics, not necessarily even the capabilities on the back end, but how do you use that against business value streams and customer journeys as well. So those are the areas that come to mind.
Excellent. We have a question here from Harish Chirukuri, and Harish says, first, great presentation on digital transformation approach, Gustav. Thank you for your time in providing your insights. His question is, can you help us with any details you can share on how your digital operating model is structured? And he mentions as a commentary on that is that what we have learned through our struggles and continue to learn is that traditional operating models will not work effectively. So the question again, whatever the extent you can share your digital operating model and how it's structured.
Absolutely. It's funny, I was just about to build on the digital operating model topic, because I would say that that's another area that I'm familiar with and engaged in as well. Yeah, so the digital operating model, that's a big topic, and you're welcome to reach out to me with more follow-up questions as well. Things that come to mind is, CIOs, CTOs are struggling with trying to figure out how to maintain a steady flow on, legacy investments, on big ERP solutions and so forth, things that are really steady state. And then how can you at the same time create a, sort of a second part of IT that is geared towards almost like purposeful self-disruption of your IT operating model, allowed to move a little bit faster and potentially challenge some of your steady state processes, like your investment process, your release process, your operations process as well, where all of a sudden you're building smaller, more nimble teams where you may have the right roles, but you don't have one person per role. You may have 7 people doing the roles of 16 people, but they're sort of fluid. They're determining as they go through the process who does what, and in many cases they'll do all the support as well. And so then the last piece I would say is the whole design. Sort of the front end part of it, the design thinking, the UX part as well, it is a big part of the digital operating model that I've had a chance to build out as well. But again, we could do a whole presentation just on that topic as well. Feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to share.
Very good. It's definitely a very evolved topic. So we have time for one more quick question here. So I'm getting this one from Michael King. And Michael asks, how do you, as an enterprise architect, ensure to, on the one hand side, you get noticed and be involved in all activities in creating the digital backbone, and on the other side, you don't slow down the activities by getting involved on those things? I think it's a good follow-up to what you just talked about. How do you find the balance, between taking control and then letting control go?
No, it's a great question. I think it basically in one question exemplifies my personal journey over the last 20 years. And that is, you'll find it very rare that outside of these kinds of environments that I refer to myself as an architect, I try to carry all the principles and practices of the architect with me, but I consider myself almost, when I'm with someone in a functional area where I'm sitting with a functional lead, I will put myself mentally in their shoes. I'll put myself mentally in someone who is working with or for them, and try to change the conversation in that way. What it does is it does 2 things. It mentally shifts me out of the need to be fully rigid to all of the enterprise standards, and it gives me an opportunity to think like them. The other thing it does is it allows me to be more empathetic, and it creates that bond with a business stakeholder as well. And if done right, and I'll say I've done it right and I've done it wrong. If done right, you will be asked for what you think during the conversations, even as the IT person, even as the architect person. And what that does is it gives you an opportunity to sometimes agree with the direction that's being taken and sometimes disagree with it as well. As long as you do that respectfully, people, if you build that relationship through empathy, you can push in ways that other architects can't as well. So it's a pretty humbling experience when it works right, but it takes some practice as well. But it just keeps you, and then just remember that you don't have to have the perfect solution. What you have to do is you have to make the next best decision every day. And if you do that, you're iterating your way through building the best possible data and digital platform, the digital backbone, and at the same time, you are responsive to all of those use cases. So yeah, again, we could do a whole presentation just on that topic too.
That's right. Gustav, that's a great way of wrapping up our session here. Thank you for your insights, for your expertise, and the vulnerability in sharing them openly. And we really appreciate that.
My pleasure. It's been an honor and a privilege, and I look forward to future dialogue. And please feel free to reach out. And have a great day, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this wraps up this segment. And at the top of the hour, we're going to have another exciting segment with the enterprise leader for Audi. And Jennifer Hatkin is going to lead us through her journey at the organization, and you do not want to miss that. So leave any comments that you'd like. As you close the session, you have a survey that will pop up that you can provide comments. For those of you who keep the conversation going on LinkedIn afterwards, the links have been provided to you. Leave a comment over there about the day, and we'll see you back at the top of the hour. Thank you, and see you soon.